Soon after noon on Tuesday the 19th of January 1915, 3 dark shapes appeared in the grey skies of the Dutch island of Ameland. The throbbing engine noises were from a relatively new type of craft, the Zeppelin. As the airships moved westward over the North Sea towards the east coast of Britain, those on the ground who had come out to observe these strange craft were watching history in the making. The first air raid in history would be on Great Yarmouth. It was to change the shape of war forever. This virtual walk explores the sites related to this event. We would not be able to conduct this walk due to the distances and terrain involved, as our journey takes us from a northern suburb of Hamburg, along the Dutch coast and across the North Sea, to somewhere between Munsley and Sea Palling. Following the coast down, we'll pass over Lessingham, Ingham and Martham and enter Great Yarmouth to the north. Our first stopping point will be Albemarle Road, then Crown Road before visiting St. Peter's Plain. On to Garden Lane and South Quay, Southgate Road, then Beeching South Dock and the Fish Wharf before crossing the river to Malsters Lane in Southtown. We'll then head to the site of the old racecourse on the South Denes before ending. Our journey starts in a northern suburb of Hamburg, Germany, Fuhlsbüttel, still the site of Hamburg's international airport, where 2 Zeppelins left their hangars, L3 and L4. They were joined by a third, L6, which had left its hangar in Nordsholt. They headed east across the North Sea to the British mainland. The plan was to use the daylight hours to navigate over the North Sea and begin their attacks under the cover of darkness. L6 was to head south towards the Thames estuary and attack industrial and dockland targets, while L3 and L4 were to head north to Humberside, attacking military and industrial complexes on the Humber. Shortly after crossing the Dutch coast, L6 developed a problem. Peter Strasser, the chief of the Imperial German Navy, was on board to direct the raid, but the airship had developed serious mechanical difficulties and had to turn back to his great frustration. Not knowing of their commander's return, L3 and L4 continued their journey. Darkness had now fallen, and the 2 Zeppelins, which had been hovering in position, now began their approach, flying together over and between the Haysborough and Wood light vessels. This course would see them make landfall somewhere between Munsley and Sea Palling. The first sighting was by a young man at Ingham. He described them as like 2 stars low over the water. As they came into sight of the Norfolk coast, they separated. L4 headed northwest, turning at Bacton and flying inshore and up and around the coast. L3 was seen by a patrol at a point between Eccles and Sea Palling. The airship then turned southeast, passing over Lessingham and Ingham. During the many raids to come, the inability of the airship's crew to identify their location was common. If they could pick up the line of a railway track by seeing the firebox from the moving steam locomotive, it would help. On the night of the 19th of January, breaks in the cloud cover enabled L3's crew to pick out the North Walsham to Great Yarmouth line, which they then followed towards the lights of Great Yarmouth. At around 8:15 p.m, the crew dropped a number of parachute flares just above the village of Martham in order to identify the route to Great Yarmouth. The flares, along with the dull throbbing noise of the engines, would have alerted the population of the village. However, the alarm had already been raised by the crew of the Haysborough light vessel, and the message of the impending approach had already been received in London some 15 minutes before. Flying at 5,000 feet, Zeppelin L-3 began its attack on the northern outskirts of Great Yarmouth. The first bomb to be dropped was an incendiary which fell harmlessly into a waterlogged field owned by a local farmer, George Humphrey, near St Michael's Church at Little Ormsby. The bomb exploded, leaving a crater about half a metre wide. The airship now came to the outskirts of Great Yarmouth proper, moving along the route of the railway line until it reached Albemarle Road. Their intention was probably to hit the beach railway station with its goods and engine sheds, but the incendiary bomb exploded in the middle of the lawn of number 6, which belonged to Mr. Norwood Suffling. Heading south, the first 110-pound high-explosive bomb fell on a pathway at the rear of 78 Crown Road. The bomb failed to explode and was later recovered and defused. Mrs. Osborne, who lived there, said she was just about to enter her back door when the bomb crashed down nearby, narrowly missing her. She described it as like a big gun. A further incendiary bomb fell close to Crown Road. It failed to detonate and left a small crater. The first casualties, however, were to occur in St. Peter's Plain. Miss Martha Taylor, aged 72, had been returning from the grocer's when she was killed outside St. Peter's Villa, the home of Mr. Ellis, a fish curer. The house front was extensively damaged, and neighbouring houses suffered considerable damage as well. Sam Smith, a 53-year-old shoemaker, had gone outside to see what the noise was. Standing about 30 feet away from the blast, he was hit by shrapnel and was killed in an instant. The Reverend McCarthy from St. Peter's Church believed the target was the church, it being the only tower that could be used for observation. The craft now moved towards the river and dropped 2 bombs in close proximity to each other. The first crashed to the roof of a stable abutting Garden Lane. It belonged to William Mays, a butcher who had his shop at 97 Blackfriars Road. Failing to detonate, it was found on a truss of hay in the morning. Moving west, the other incendiary was dispatched and fell opposite the Messrs. Woodger's shop near the First and Last Tavern on South Quay. Fragments of the bomb were soon on display in the pub. The Zeppelin then followed the line of the river, dropping its 9th bomb between the drifter Mishnama and a pilot boat, the Patrol. It struck the riverside of the dock gates at Beeching South Dock, where it smashed through 2 planks, causing the dock to flood on the tide. Again it failed to detonate, bouncing off the stone quay of Trinity Wharf and harmlessly into the river. Bomb number 10 fell in the ground used to store the unique swill baskets at the fish wharf. This one did explode, fracturing a water main and destroying an electric light standard. The entire glass roof of the fish wharf was smashed, and the fish sales office badly damaged. The herring fleet, which would have normally been moored near the fish wharf, had, with luck, been moved up the river just 2 days prior to the raid. Another high explosive bomb fell next to the steamer drifter Piscatorial. Harry Eastwick, the owner, had already lost 1 boat in the war to a mine. Shrapnel from the blast also damaged a grain store on Malston Lane, owned by Coombe and Company. The final bomb was another high explosive munition, falling behind the racecourse on South Deans, just under a mile away from the last. This caused a large crater, but little structural damage. The raid had taken a little over 10 minutes, and with her payload dispatched, the airship headed out to sea. Looking back, the crew would have seen the lights of the town being belatedly extinguished under the orders of the borough engineer. Once safely over the sea, L3 turned back up the coast, arriving off Cromer around 10 p.m. From here it turned northeast and headed for home. Between midnight and 1 a.m, the residents of the northern Dutch towns of Sneek and Hommerts heard the airship passing overhead on its way back to its base. All members of the crew of L3 and L4, which had attacked King's Lynn and Yarmouth, were to be decorated by the Kaiser with iron crosses for their parts in the raids. Indeed, the Kaiser was so pleased he immortalised L3 and its captain on a plate for his own personal dinner service. The news of the raid made headlines around the world. The New York Tribune described it as a disgrace to civilization, while the Daily Mirror ran the headline, "The Coming of the Baby Killers." While in Germany it was used as propaganda, with postcards glorifying the raid. Today there is little to remind us of the first loss of civilian life from an air raid. The blue plaque, which was erected by the Great Yarmouth Local History and Archaeological Society in St. Peter's Plain, first in 1981 and replaced in 2012. It can be found on the house which was so badly destroyed in St. Peter's Plain that fateful evening. There were also plaques placed on the graves of Martha Taylor and Sam Smith 100 years after their deaths. A few fragments of the airship itself are now museum exhibits, for L3 crashed less than a month later and its crew's wartime exploits came to an end. And so ends our virtual heritage walk. The Great Yarmouth Heritage Guides will be pleased to see you on one of our walks in the near future.